Thank you for joining us to this teach-out on augmented and mixed reality. I feel like I've learned a lot in this teach-out, especially when I talk to domain experts. We reviewed a lot of the technical limitations. We also talked a little bit about the issues that we face when we're programming these interfaces. I would say the one thing, the theme that came through in this teach-out is really that in the future years we can expect a transition from consumption of augmented reality and mixed reality and virtual reality content to more like production of these kinds of contents. And in order to achieve that, we really need to lower the threshold. We need, the barrier of entry needs to be lower. And that's something that, as you know, in our research, and Steve also in your research, is like a really, really important topic.
Yeah, and one other topic I think that we touched on in the panel with Tom and with Joanna and with you was the need for collaborative applications. So I think that really an important part of the future of augmented reality is going to be in shaping the ways that we actually communicate with each other. And so I think just to illustrate my point, think about the applications that you use on your phone. So I would guess that most of them involve communication with someone else, whether it's in real time or whether you're consuming some content that someone else produced. Think of how useful or useless your phone would be if it didn't have a data connection, if it were offline, because you couldn't be able to connect with those people. And I think really a lot of augmented reality applications are going to just be better ways to allow us to communicate with other people, both around us and remotely as well. But there are still lots of challenges. So there are technical challenges in just producing any augmented reality application, but there are also design challenges that we're going to face once we move into more collaborative applications, so dealing with privacy, issues of harassment, etc.
I think I want to add on to your point of collaboration. In order to do this effectively, we also need access and we need education. And coming back to the example that we used, the book as an interface that has both augmentative and immersive qualities. This book can only work if there's a system in place that makes us literate to use and have access to this information. And likewise for augmented reality, we need to think about the systems that are in place so people have access to it and can actually use it in an intelligent way. The point that I'm trying to make is that the device itself, be it a book or like an augmented reality interface, doesn't provide that. There's still, in the US, for example, there's still a high number of illiterate people. I think some estimates say 10% of the American adult population is illiterate. And if you now translate this to augmented reality, I think there's a call to action to think about what systems and infrastructure we need to make this effective and collaborative use case scenarios, for example. Yeah.
That's a good point, Roland. To me, actually, part of the current state reminds me also a little bit what we experience with video conferencing. I feel like video conferencing is something that can work in a lot of locations, but just when you want to have it ad hoc, that's, for example, I want to Skype somebody into my lecture, like in the classroom setting, it still needs a lot of prep work. And I feel like with augmented reality, the amount of effort I need to put in to actually just enable access to these technologies, we are not there yet. It was also really when we talked to, in the discussions that I had with members of my lab, I think one of the main, the consensus was like, it's a really good beginning, we're getting to see a lot of potential, but we are not there yet. I feel like, for example, in the tool that I created, Proto AR, to enable students to prototype augmented reality scenes and actually do 3D modeling, not digitally, but physically, I was inspired by this kind of background, but I have to say I observed exactly what you said. It's the idea is simple in principle, but it becomes really hard. I mean, the students were really creative and they created really nice, 3D objects and the sculpting and all these experiences from when they were younger and childhood. All this came back, all this skill came back. But to really make this loop to what we think is a compelling augmented reality interface, something that really improves our daily lives, that is a big jump that we still have to enable somehow.
Exactly, and this is why I think it is so important to have access to this technology, to have a good education, and also to create a culture around it. And like coming back to the example of clay, with a 20,000 year or more like culture around it, it might not take that long for augmented reality, but might still take a few decades or maybe generations to let this culture grow and evolve around these technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, Roland, that's a great point. We really, and that was also why we actually essentially created this teacher, right? We wanna participate, we wanna help to grow this culture, this understanding of augmented and virtual and mixed reality, all these technologies. We wanted to address the confusion that exists with some of the technical terms. And I feel like we've covered a lot of the devices side. We've also talked a lot about the applications. I really learned a lot from, as I said earlier, from talking to our domain experts. This code of conduct, this really questioning, is what you see, is that really kind of real? Is something being manipulated? Is photorealism the thing that we really need to aim for? Or is it maybe better to be able to tell virtual from physical and real content, tell them apart? I feel there are lots of interesting questions. So I feel like we've actually had a lot of different views and opinions by just inviting lots of experts from around Michigan, essentially, from the University of Michigan. But what I think would really add a lot to this teach-out is if you joined us in the forums and actually shared with us the kinds of things that you are thinking about, the questions that you have, what are important concerns for you about augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality, and what are possible futures. We look forward to discussing these with you in the forum, and we will respond throughout the teach-out in another session.